All right, looks like we're going to get started. My name's Brian Braun, and I work for Acquia here, and we have a bunch of guys working for Acquia downtown DC. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can empower content creators using Drupal. And this is obviously a topic that's pretty big in the Drupal community right now, especially with all the work that's gone into Drupal 8 and the changes that are going to be very promising for content creators going forward. But what do we do now when Drupal 8 is not out and we have sites and our authors, our content authors, are having a difficult time updating and creating content for those sites? So to kind of get us started, I want to talk about something that I saw on Scott Adams' blog a little while ago. And he wrote a blog post. He's the author of the Dilbert comic strip. And he was talking about something he called the botched interface market. And he brought up some travel companies like Orbitz and Travelocity and things like that. And he talked about how their early websites were so poor as far as user experience goes, it created an opening, a botched interface market for somebody, some underdog, to come in who could just replicate the exact same features and give a better interface on top of it and snatch up all sorts of market share and customers. And he talked about how, I think one of the companies was Hipmunk that was doing that, how they had a really nice interface. And he started giving all sorts of examples, kind of like venting and complaining about, like, here's a botched interface, why don't we make something there? Here's a botched interface, why don't we make something there? And my aim is that Drupal doesn't become a botched interface market where the CMS itself is really powerful under the hood, but because we can't present a nice authoring experience, somebody else can come in and start using their own content management system that's a little bit better. And we'll find as we talk that a lot of that is under your control if you are a site builder or somebody who's helping build out a Drupal instance for somebody. And to kind of show how we're going to structure this, there are two main ways that we can empower our content creators. The first way is to give them more control over what they're doing, and we can do that by giving them power tools and by reducing the risk for them to play around on the site. And then the other way is to give them less confusion, and that we can do by giving them a better interface to work with and streamlining their workflows so they could just go in and move right through the process of what they're trying to do. And some ways that I'm going to go about covering these things are by looking at borrowed techniques, things from other platforms. Before I started getting really involved in Drupal, I had set up several WordPress sites. I became pretty familiar with kind of the WordPress way of doing things. And I'm going to talk about ways that we can borrow techniques from WordPress specifically to improve the authoring experience in Drupal. And I'm also going to talk about low-hanging fruit. So there are some small things that we can do that make a really big difference. A lot of these things are actually features that you could just turn on in the core interface of Drupal core, and some of them are contributed modules. So if you ever see this green apple, that's a low-hanging fruit on one of my slides, and it's something that you might want to look at. Yes? Yes, they are posted online. You'll see on the last slide. So the green apple are low-hanging fruits, and the WordPress icon is a borrowed technique from WordPress. So that's kind of how this is going to go. All right, so here's a question. What would it look like if Gmail was built with Drupal? I imagine that a lot of you might use Gmail, or at least you know people who use Gmail. And this is kind of the classic interface for creating an email in Gmail. It has, who you're sending it to, title, body. We've attached a document down here and functionality to send it, delete it, and kind of manage this. And if you think about it, you could set something up like this in Drupal, but this is what it would look like. So I don't know any Gmail users who are rushing to start their new email address on Drupal right away. But we have everything here. The functionality is there. You've got your body, your send to, and I mean your error, of course, at the top of the page. And here's the second half where you've got your attachment and your labels and things like that. So just to kind of dig a little bit deeper and see what the difference is. First of all, you can see that this same functionality with Gmail takes about 1/3 of the space as it does in just kind of turning on the fields for Drupal. And if you kind of look at where that wasted space is, Gmail, maybe they've got a little bit there, but when it comes to Drupal, there's just default out of the box. You have space at the top, space at the bottom. Some of this space is actually description information that you only really need to read once until you understand it, and then you don't need to ever see it again, but it keeps coming back up every time you create a node. And just another comparison we can make is how much space on your interface is allotted for attaching a document to your email, right? For Gmail, you've got your little icon and your attachment right there, and kind of the default Drupal one, you've got this big brick of space that just says, I want to upload a file, right? And there's got to be a better way that we can make this experience less intimidating, where you don't have to scroll down the page in order to fill out a simple email. And here's the thing, your content creators, like, they're real people, they have lives, and they're using these applications like Gmail or Facebook or Evernote to manage the rest of their lives. So when they go to work, they're having a completely different experience, and they, as they have this experience, it's hard for them to feel like your default Drupal setup is a modern web application like the applications that they're used to. And I mean, this is hard because you know that these organizations have like whole like usability departments and teams who are doing research, and they're making improvements iteratively, and they're investing a lot of resources into the authoring experience. And as a site builder, it's like, I'm just one person, and I have to build the site. How can I also do all these things? So it's hard, and we're going to talk about kind of, I think the low-hanging fruits are going to be a key for making big leaps and bounds improvements. So one thing that was kind of an aha moment for me when I was working with Drupal was an article I read by Larry Garfield, where he said, Drupal is not a CMS. And there's been like terminology wars about this kind of thing. But the reason it was so big for me is he said he preferred to think of Drupal as a CMF, a content management framework, in which you use Drupal to build a custom content management system for a certain user. So that might be, you know, a government entity or an educational institution or a blogger or somebody else. And each person gets their own custom CMS. And there are pros and cons to that. I mean, it's because Drupal's so flexible that we can do that. But if everybody gets their own custom CMS, it's really difficult even for them to find answers and support. If they're using Gmail, they can do a Google search and say, you know, how do I set up a local client for this Gmail? But they can't do a Google search for their CMS that you built with Drupal, because Drupal itself is abstracted one layer back from the CMS that they have. So their CMS needs to be pretty usable, since they can't get support online, for managing the specific workflows that you as a site builder have set up for them. So usability and having a good content workflow is a bigger deal, I think, than a lot of people think it is, because you kind of leave your users high and dry if you don't have that set up. So if you're a site builder, and or maybe a module developer or a themer, you might have in your mind this thought like, okay, that's great, but I'm not a designer. And the fact is, you actually are a designer. And whether you identify with being a designer or not, the decisions that you make when you're building a Drupal site have design implications. Sometimes they might just trickle down, but a lot of times they directly impact the end user. So you might say you're not a designer, but being ignorant of the fact that you are making design decisions is going to hurt people in the long run. So it's better to say, I'm a bad designer, and what can I do to become a little bit better at making my design decisions have a better impact? The other myth you might think is it will take a long time, and it'll take a lot of effort. And the truth is, yes, it could, but it doesn't have to. And we're going to try and see what we can do to make it quick and snappy. So, the first part is more control. So we can help them with more control and with less confusion. And here's what we're going to do to give our content creators more control. Power tools. So when I talk about power tools, I'm thinking that you can have a workshop with table saws and planers and and shop equipment. But what we really want to do for content creators is give them power tools, which is like something that can do a lot of the similar things, but it's something they can hold in their hand, something that is a lot more accessible to them. In the world of Drupal, your table saws and things, those are like views and panels and some of the big interfaces that your content creators are not, frankly, interested in learning. But they still want to have power. They still want to be able to do work on their site. So how can we abstract some of the confusingness and bring it down to their domain and give them the power that they're looking for? And I think a big key for this is recognizing where the content creator feels comfortable. And my personal experience is that the node edit page, which is where they're creating their content, is like their comfortable place. So how can we bring powerful functionality to the node edit page without overwhelming people and giving them the power to do what they need to do? So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention WYSIWYG at all, just because telling your end users that they should be using HTML to build out the body of their content isn't really an option anymore. And it is our responsibility to provide them an interface that they can use and that they're comfortable with. And that usually ends up with WYSIWYG. You're probably pretty familiar with the standard options for WYSIWYG in Drupal modules, and also file uploads, the media module, and IMCE, and things like that. We just need to make sure, as a baseline, that they have that set up. And if they don't have that set up, then that's one of the first things we got to do, because that's where they're going to be feeling a lot of pain. Add to menu. So this is one of the things that you can turn on in the admin interface on each specific content type. And you may already know this, but you go in and you say, for the article content type, I want to expose an option for them to add this article to their menus, right? It typically shows up in a vertical tab, and it's pretty simple. They can say before they hit publish, oh, I want this to be in a menu. And I mean, this is a quick way for you to give a power tool to them, because they don't have to go in and navigate like the entire menus page and get a little bit terrified of what's there. If it's on their content, on their node edit page, they can add it to the menu and they're good to go. Here's something that I noticed was pretty big in my experience in WordPress. In WordPress, they have this concept of shortcodes. And shortcodes are little snippets that you can put into the body field of your node, or in WordPress example, in their articles or pages, that will kind of, it will bring in some more advanced functionality in the place where they want it to be. So a pretty simple example is for WordPress, you put in bracket gallery and you just put it in the middle of your blog post or something. Then when they hit publish, you look at the page, they've got a photo gallery right there. Really powerful, and they don't need to know any of the JavaScript or things necessary with that photo gallery. You're probably thinking, hey, Drupal has this kind of thing as well. But the difference is, in the WordPress world, exposing new functionality as a shortcode is kind of like their first go-to thing, right? If you were to build a WordPress plugin that perhaps creates a quiz, you would say, all right, I've got my quiz plugin, and I'm going to give a shortcode to the user so that they can put this quiz in their blog post. In Drupal, we tend to expose it as a block. Here's a block for a quiz. And what that does is it says, okay, now you've got more functionality, but you're giving it to the site builder instead of giving it to the content creator. So Drupal does have some great shortcode modules already. Things like caption filter, video filter, insert view, and so on. They tend to be known as filters in the Drupal world, so if you're searching for a way that you can have your content creators to embed videos in a very simple way without needing embed codes or things like that, search Drupal filter video or something like that, and that'll point you in the right direction. The more filter type modules there are for Drupal, I think that's going to be a big thing for content creators, because that's extremely accessible for them, and they don't need to have to get into the block system in order to add advanced things to their content. There's a lot of ways that you can alter layout, of course, in Drupal. I'm less familiar with panels than I am with context, and one thing you can do with context is use a module called context node. And with context node, you can say, okay, I've got a context admin screen with tons of different contexts that affect everything from layout to styling decisions to breadcrumbs. You can use context to manage almost anything. But what if you just want to say, of that huge amount of functionality, I want to pick out a couple different context options and put them on the node edit page, so that the person can say, oh, I'm going to get a couple layout choices and just choose from them. Or maybe I get a couple styling theme-like choices and choose from them. You can use context node to bring those contexts to the editor's page. And that can be really powerful, but it also depends on how you set it up. Like, you can set it up in such a way that it's not as useful, but if you leverage the tool, you can make a really nice experience for them. A similar type of thing that they have in WordPress is the option to pick templates from the page themselves. So instead of being individual contexts, it's literally the .php templates in your file system. So in a WordPress page, you can use the standard page, or in this example, you can say, I want the template that has a full width page with a sidebar, or I want the template that's like the front page template. So essentially, as a themer, you can create a whole option of templates there, and then they can just choose from the ones in the code base that they want to apply to their page. Yes?
Is this functionality just for the user interface, or also for the forms?
For the forms?
Right. Like if you can choose a template for the user interface, that's good. But is it possible just to also pick up a template for the form for when you are creating the content?
Right. So this picks literally the files out of the code base. So if you have different markup in your files or different PHP being output in your files, it'll take everything and use that as the template. So it all depends on what you put in the templates themselves.
But this system, can you do this for both what the users can see, or can you use this also for what you can see as an admin while you're creating the content?
So this is not for the admin experience itself, not for the admin interface, but it's for the finished page, what the end user comes to when they visit the website. So yeah, that's something that comes with WordPress core. Yes?
Can those template labels on the right-hand side be made more user-friendly?
Yes. So the template picker module is a Drupal module. It's actually one that I've been working on myself because I wanted this kind of functionality in Drupal. And it does have clean names, which you just put in a comment in your template file itself, and it'll pull in the clean name for Drupal. So in the Drupal world, you can use this for your node templates, and essentially, as soon as you drop it into the code base, it'll appear in a select box on the node edit page if you follow the right naming convention. And the nice thing about it is that it gives them control, and you have control as a themer of what goes into the templates, and they can just choose from the options you give them. which is great for keeping it in version control and having, everything versioned like that, like you wouldn't normally have in a lot of layout systems that you have to affect through the UI, but they still have the power of controlling it through the UI themselves. So those are the power tools we're talking about. And we also want to talk about reducing risk. So I know this has kind of been like a brain dump of like a lot of different modules and tools. And the reason we're doing that is because we kind of want to fill the well of options that we have so that in your individual circumstance, every single one of these is not going to work. But if you have a well to draw on, then you'll be able to know how to take these tools and apply it to your situation. To reduce risk, we have to find ways that the content creator won't get burned when they're working on their website, right? Because if a content creator accidentally deletes the front page or goes into a bad situation where they get burned, they're going to be risk adverse. They're not going to want to touch new options that they see in there, and like there's going to be consequences for it from their managers and people up the line, especially because working on a website is so visible. So if we can prevent our content creators from getting burned, then they're going to have more power to do the more complex things that they want to do. So a couple easy things: always put description text when you're creating new fields or if you're working on new content types. I always say, I'm just throwing up the content type right now. I'm going to come back later and add the description text, but I never do. So the first time you see the description text field, put something in there. That's kind of like my personal rule. And like if you're going to come back later, then you can come back later and make it nicer, But you should at least put something in there so that if you don't get the chance to come back later, they know what the field does and they know how it affects the outcome on the website. WordPress has autosave out of the box. It does what you think it does. As they're working on their article, their drafts are automatically being saved, just like Gmail or Google Drive or other applications. There's been talk about autosave for Drupal core. As far as I know, it's kind of still up in the air, but there is an autosave module that might be able to bring that functionality. I'm sure this may have happened to you as well, but I've had situations when I migrated my personal blog from WordPress to Drupal where I spent 45 minutes writing up something and then I lose it all, and you just face palm. It's like, why me? I put so much effort into this, and there's nothing worse than losing that much work, especially when it's creative work that it's hard to spin back up and do over again. So autosave can be a big win for your content creators. And along the same line, revisions. Revisions come with Drupal core, and honestly, my rule of thumb is, unless there's a really good reason not to, I just go into the content types page and I just enable revisions by default for all my content types, because it doesn't really have much overhead, and it's like insurance with no cost. Like, I would love to sign up for an insurance plan like that. So if you can have insurance that if somebody loses something or something goes wrong and their page is borked and they need to go back, that they have an easy way to hop back to the last revision, then that's going to be killer, and that's going to prevent a really awkward conversation in the future between you and your site builders when you're like, oh yeah, we could have set that up, but we decided not to, arbitrarily, And another cool thing, this comes from WordPress, is preview, the ability to preview the page that you're working on or to preview the post that you're working on. You may be aware that there is a preview button in Drupal. I've had pretty poor experiences with the preview button throughout my work, and I don't know of any content creator who's pressed preview and seen what they expected to see in the Drupal world. So what I actually like to do is turn off the preview button, which you can do in on the content types page. You can just say, disallow previews. And that prevents a lot of confusion. It's unfortunate because we want to give them a way to preview. The workaround that works is you can use the View Unpublished module, which allows you to grant various roles the ability to view unpublished content and make sure that there's an easy way for people to just save their stuff as unpublished and take a look at it there. That's the best preview that I've been able to find so far. And as far as managing risk again, appropriate access is key. And this is really hard because there's not like a module that'll fix it for you, right? You have to actually know what the actual roles in your organization are. And you need to be granular enough with those roles, and you need to have a process in place for if somebody wants to escalate themselves to the next role where they're ready for more functionality, that you can do that. And that requires a lot of like knowing the users. It requires watching the users work. It requires knowing your organization really well. But as far as the tools go, once you do know those things, there are some things that that I've learned that are really useful. The shortcut menu that comes in Drupal 7 is really nice. The gray bar, just putting shortcuts up there is helpful. There's also a module called Admin Menu Source, which says you define a menu using the Drupal menu system, and you point that to certain roles, and that's the menu that they get in their admin interface. So you can have complete customization over what exact links they have access to. And if you've got the patience for that and you know the roles really well, you can give them exactly what they want to see as a menu goes.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Does that actually limit the access to it, or is it just presenting links to them? Like if I know the URL to it, can I still access it?
That's a good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. Does anybody know the answer to that? Yes?
I'm going to venture to say the answer is if you turn it off there, they can't access it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm 99.9%.
All right.
Because we have requests to turn on something.
Okay.
You can look at menu item visibility modules that allow you to control individual menu items on and off based on.
Okay, menu item visibility module, by the way, is what we said. You can turn them on and off. So, and I'm sure there's more options out there, but the menus are key because people, a lot of content creators, they're not going to learn like the actual URL paths to get to things in Drupal. Like, the menus are their interface. So what you give them on the menus is what they're going to be able to do, and that's all they're going to see as far as what they can do. So having that nailed down is really important, and it can be a big boom if you've got that on target. All right, so I'm kind of halfway through right now. Just want to see where we've come from. We've talked about ways to give more control by using the power tools that bring site building technology down to the domain of the content creator, and we've talked about reducing risk, which helps them from getting burned. But now I want to talk about how we can provide less confusion. When we bring these power tools down, like invariably we're increasing your node edit pages and you're giving more options, and how can we actually reduce the confusion there? And we can do that by giving them a better interface and by streamlining their workflows. Okay, so less confusion. This is probably one of the worst interfaces that's persisted across generations of people. And still today, like, we've got the universal remote control. And you probably have one of these. You know that it's bad. You know that you only use like 5% of the buttons on it. Your like tried and true buttons on your remote. And when you look at Drupal, like, it's kind of startling how many interfaces in Drupal have like visual similarities to the universal remote control. But I mean, that's kind of how it is. And as site builders, you're going to have to deal with that, but hopefully we can prevent our content creators from dealing with that. So let's look at an interface that I think works really well. Yeah, this is great. And what's really great about this interface is that it's actually for power users as well. So if you're a power user and you know how to use like limiting search terms, or you want to look up comparisons, or you want to know the weather, or do calculations and unit conversions, you can do it all with this. But because you can do it, just because you can do it with that, it doesn't present all those options to the person who just wants to do a simple search, right? That functionality is available, but it's not cluttering up the world of the person who wants to use it in a very simple way. And there's some things we can do for Drupal like that as well. So kind of the easy low-hanging fruit is to pick an admin theme that works a little bit better. There are lots of options. I haven't seen them all. I don't know what they all are. One that I really like is Rubik. And the reason I like Rubik is because it takes a lot of the stuff that you see usually in a single column and it brings it into 2 columns. So it gives you more to work with without having to scroll and scroll and scroll, which is always good. It also tries to reduce the clutter on the workspace, and description text tends to be hidden out of the way in these tooltips, which is great because you don't need description text every single time you're going to create a node. You only need it when you're looking for it. And if there's a visual pattern that people know where to look for description text when they need it, then that's really helpful for them. That's probably one of the biggest things that I like about the Rubik theme. There's new up-and-comers. The Ember theme was designed to work with the Spark distribution, so that's in Drupal 7. It's responsive, and that's a really big deal. And there's probably more that I'm not aware of. But just looking at your options for admin themes and picking one that works can be a small thing you do that makes a big difference. So this is like kind of information architecture design 101 is as a site builder, you are putting things together on a page. You're adding fields and you're creating interfaces, maybe your module screen. You're creating a module and you have an admin page for your module. Just take the things that are logical, that go together, and group them together. In the WordPress world, they have a sidebar, of course, and they have 2 main sections of their sidebar. And the one section is essentially content management, which is, if you're a content creator, that's safe. And the other section is more like CMS management, which if you're a content creator, that's risky. So you know instantly, like, okay, these are things I'm not interested in, and these are things that I am interested in. This is just an example, but you should be grouping things logically according to what is logical to the content creator, not what is logical to you. And that was kind of one of the changes from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7. Is in Drupal 6 there was like this sites build. There was like a site building navigation structure. But that didn't make a lot of sense to end users. It mostly made sense to Drupalists who had the vocabulary of themer and site builder and module developer in their brains. So better logical grouping can be a big win. And in Drupal, you can use grouping in your admin menus. You can use it in your fields when you're adding fields to a content type. Also in the WYSIWYG icons, you have tools usually to group icons together. And I mean, this isn't rocket science. Like, if you're a developer, you group your code together. That makes sense. And to include files. And if you're a CSS person, you group your CSS rules together underneath comments. So just taking like that extra 5% of energy to group things in the admin interface is going to make a big difference. Of course, there's a couple modules that help with that. You can use field collections, which allows you to make these combo fields. That's really nice for adding, a combination of fields at a time. And then in Rubik, there are field sets that you can expand and collapse, and you can do that, in various other Drupal setups. The UI for Rubik is one that I like, but collapsing fields when they're less necessary is also a way that you can use grouping to your advantage. Sorry.
Does this come out of the box, Drupal 7, or just a module?
Field sets?
Yes.
I believe it's out of the box. So, but I mean, there are like field collections module, and the things that you can do to, there's a lot of modules that help you in grouping fields. So, yeah. Sorry, what's that? Field group. Okay, field group. Okay. Burying advanced and less frequently used functionality. So with field group and field collections and things like that, if you have advanced functionality, you've got to bury it into a place where only advanced people are going to look for it, right? And Gmail does a great job of this. Their whole interface is about managing your inbox and using your emails, and there's one button for like deep customization of Gmail, and everything is in that one button. And so there is functionality for power users, but they just have to take one more step to find it. It's not mixed in with all the rest of the stuff that you normally use when you're trying to create emails in Gmail. And my rule of thumb for burying things is that you can hide things that are not necessary, you can collapse things that are optional, and you should expand things which are highly recommended. So this works with like vertical tabs as well. Like sometimes you can put things into your vertical tabs that are kind of more optional, or you can make them like a big open field on the top of your Drupal admin interface if it is highly recommended. And I think it's like the field group module and other modules like that which help make that possible. There's a module called conditional fields, which is like user experience sugar. And what it basically does is, if you pick an outcome on one field, it changes. You can tell it to change how other fields are set up on your screen. So there's an example here of, do you love Drupal? And if you click yes, then you get another field that says, great, tell us more. And that way, if you use things like conditional fields or the states API in Drupal, you don't have a situation where there's a field that doesn't do anything. And, oh, you have to explain, yeah, this field actually does do something, but you have to have this other option checked first, right? And that's just like, that's a big problem. So making sure that what is visible is what's most important to your end users, and they have access to the things that are less important, but that those things are tucked out of the way and that they know how to get to them if they need them. Removing things is a really great thing to do, especially on a role basis, because if you have content creators, there's probably different levels of experience within your content creation team. There are some people who are just going to edit things, and then there are some people who want to have more control. So there are modules that you can use to essentially take your node edit page and rip things out of it and just turn them off. Things like the simplify module, which you can use to hide fields, or the jammer module, which you can use to hide almost anything. And that's really helpful, especially in situations when you have like the promoted to front page checkbox and you've already customized the front page, so that doesn't even mean anything to anybody. And you just want to take that out instead of having to explain, oh, that does nothing, or oh, that promotes to our RSS feed. If you can be more specific on like little like issues like that that are buried in there and just tear them out, then there will be more space and more room for the things that are actually most important. One specific one on here, the hide submit module is really awesome, because when a person clicks submit or save on their content type or on their node, a lot of times like nothing happens for a second, and then they click it like 14 more times. And like you as a web developer, you like know to look up to the tab and you see the spinny and you're like, okay, yeah, something's happening, I just gotta chill out. But they don't know to look for that kind of thing, and that could cause problems like multiple submissions, data integrity and such. So hide submit means that you can say, oh, when they click submit, I'm going to gray out the button, or I'm going to give them like a word that says processing. Give them a visual clue that like it's working. Just gotta have to wait for a little while. So that's a nice one there. Here's kind of an example of what you can do if you just like strip out some unnecessary things. And this is nice because those are the power tools for a content creator who really wants them, but for the person who they're perhaps technology resistant or computers weren't around when they were born, like this is fantastic. You can make that person really happy.
So to take the default settings we have on the left side,
Mhm.
is that hidden? Like
Yeah. Yeah, they are hidden, so they're still there. If you have defaults set up that work, then they'll still work, and you can just provide them with exactly what they want.
Right,
Yeah,
Did you do that using Jam?
I believe both Jammer and Simplify can do that. All right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is really obvious. Can you help me get rid of the edit summary?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
Like, you know how next to body field, edit summary is always there?
Yeah.
I feel like for a lot of users that also is confusing, they don't know how to get rid of that.
Good question. Who knows how to do that?
You can turn it on.
So there's a long text field and there's a long text summary field you can use field. So if you don't like how body comes, delete it and add your own body. And then you get a long text outline.
You don't have to do that either. You can just actually go to the body field and edit and actually uncheck the summary feature.
Awesome.
Can you repeat the answer?
Yes, so a couple options. Number one, you can take out the body field itself, just remove it and add your own body field that doesn't have those things if you want to. Or you can go to the content type, I believe, itself, and there's an option to turn off that summary. Yeah.
Just one warning, if you delete the body text that comes with a new content type, there's functionality built into that one that you lose and you will not be able to get back.
Okay. So there are other implications if you delete the body field. Probably just going in and unchecking it is a good option there. Yes. So we talked about cleaning up the interface a little bit, and now I want to talk about streamlining workflows. So here's low-hanging fruit, a module that I really, really like. I've just been getting into it recently, but the default multi-select that comes with Drupal is about as difficult to work with as anything can be, because you need to know coming out, like as soon as you land on the page, that control clicking is a process that you use in order to use multi-select, which is something that people just don't do a lot. There's a module called Chosen, which provides a lot better multi-select, and kind of a little GIF demo of how that works. You start typing into the field, and of your multi-select options, it'll automatically autocomplete them for you, select them from the drop-down, and add them as little tags, which is really nice. You've probably seen that in Gmail or Evernote or something like that. And then you can remove them all in one place instead of having to scroll through this tiny box and look and see if there's anything else that's been multi-selected in the box. So I think this is huge, and it's one that I've really liked recently. Dashboard, so you can build dashboards in Drupal. There's a lot of modules that help you do that. In WordPress, they have a dashboard, and what's key about their dashboard isn't what's on it, but the fact that when you log in, you go straight to it. So you can think about that. Think about the role of your user, and when they log in, where should they go straight to? Maybe it's a dashboard, maybe it's a node edit page, maybe it's just the content page. Wherever it is, if you point them to the right place that they should go as soon as they log in, that'll be a big win. And here's just another one. It's the add another module, which says, for certain content types, you tend to rapidly fire a whole bunch of them out, like you're uploading a ton of images or videos or things like that. And add another allows you to add some option where you say, okay, I'm going to click save to publish this or just save it, but I also want another, like a blank screen that I can work with and add another module like that. And this is one of the options, just to add the button down at the bottom of the page, but you can also get it to come up in a message after you click submit and do things like that. And this is the kind of thing where if you actually watch your users and you see that like they're clicking save and then they're clicking this and then they're going here and they're just trying to get back to the page again, something like this can be a really big deal. So I don't think it would work for all content types in all cases, but I think in some it's really awesome.
Does it always say save? Is there any way
way to make that button say something different?
So the question is
and
there...
do the same function.
Okay.
I just want to make up for it.
All right. The question is there any way to change the text itself just on the save button, but keep the same functionality? Does anyone have an answer for that? What's that? A form alter? Yeah. So form alter. There's the string override module, which allows you to do things like that for general text in the admin interface, but I'm pretty sure it can't handle a button like that. So maybe it's a good module option for somebody who wants something to work on. But I mean, to be like, we've kind of done a brain dump. We've talked about a lot of different tools, but to be very clear, the best tool of them, or the best tool of all of the ones that we talked about for improving the admin and content creator experience is the one that works best for your users. And I know that there are other sessions going on throughout CapitalCamp that talk about how do we do usability testing and how do we report usability testing and how important that testing is. Like, that's very important, and that's really the key. But you need to know kind of what your options are with Drupal. A lot of times it doesn't mean you have to make something custom. A lot of times you can use contributed modules, and that's the wonderful thing about the Drupal community. But make sure that you know what the tools are, but that you actually do the testing. You actually know who your users are, and you figure out what's going to work best for them. And you watch them. You watch them use the content management system, and you see what they are doing. And that's going to be kind of the overriding principle. That's going to be better than any tool that you just turn on and say, yes, +1 content experience, I can go home now. It's like you actually have to use some brain work. But once you do, and if you do know the options you have, then you can find something that's really smooth. And I don't know if it'll be better than the experience they get with Gmail or Evernote or something like that, but you can at least make it so that their work sucks a little less and that they don't hate Drupal for the rest of their lives, but actually say, Drupal works well for what I need it to do. And with that, I'll take some questions, if you have any. Yes?
Doesn't that node context module allow you to put multiple contacts for each node?
Multiple contexts for each node. So you mean, to clarify, to choose between contexts?
More than one contact on the node.
More than one context. I have not used it for more than one context on a node. So it may, but I've not attempted to set that up before. Yeah? Right. Okay, so I'm not sure I got it all, but let me try and repeat. So you're asking about editing CSS files from the admin interface and how that could be turned on? Okay, yeah. So there are a couple options for that. Editing CSS from the admin interface comes with WordPress core, so that's a lot of fun. And for Drupal, it probably depends on the size of your project. I'll leave the maintainability questions about that for somebody else. But if you want to do that kind of thing in Drupal, there is the CSS injector module, which you can use as kind of like a context for CSS rules. And there's also the, I think, code per node module, which you can use to put on individual nodes if you want to add additional CSS. Again, I think there's some strong opinions on maintainability, especially for very large sites. If you do expose that kind of thing, it would obviously be the kind of thing that you would want to have role-specific, so it doesn't confuse, at the very least, just normal editors or content creators on the site. Yeah?
Do you know if the chosen module works with term reference fields and also use it for
Views exposed. Oh man, that would be gold if you could do that.
Yes, it does. I think it does.
Yeah?
I think I used that. I can check for you though.
All right, so.
So if you want to check with me, I think it does because I think I'm using it. But
We've used it with views.
With views?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right.
But I
So-
mean, even term references, I may have that also.
Yeah. So it sounds like that's probably a go on that, which is great. All right, the slides are up. brianbraun.com/slides. We did like a lot of modules, so all the links are in there if you want to check it out sometime. But thanks a lot.
Yeah, this is an exposed filter, and that's a term reference field right there for my view. So I have an exposed filter in a separate block. The Opera is a taxonomy term field. I think I'm using term reference, not entity reference there, because I know I've got a couple places where I wanted to take it back to entity reference, but I can check for you to make sure it's term reference.
Thanks. Hi.
Do you go to other Drupal camps?
Other
You just stay in
Drupal
this
camps.
area?
So I live in this area. So I haven't like traveled to other camps.